Welcome back to Tide Pod on the YouTube home of TideIllustrated.com. Jack Knowlton, Tony Sakalas. If you're watching us on the YouTube, you can also, of course, listen to the show on Spotify. We revamped the background a little bit, threw a little bit more crimson in there. Want to shout that out. Got the nameplates down below, so we're spicing it up here in the production room at Tide Pod. But we have a game to preview. Tony, Alabama is looking to recover after getting knocked on its ass in Nashville, Tennessee at 4-1, 1-1 in the SEC, facing South Carolina. The Gamecocks at 3-2 come into Bryant-Denny Stadium for the first 11 a.m. home game of the season. Alabama, of course, played at 11 on the road in Wisconsin, but we'll have an early kick at Bryant-Denny on ABC with Alabama and South Carolina. And I want to start, obviously, we're recording this after having talked with Kalen DeBoer, all the assistants, a few players, including, of course, Malachi Moore this week. What's just been kind of the general messaging you've noticed from everybody talking to people as Alabama tries to put Vanderbilt in the rear view and prepares for yes, seemingly underwhelming on paper, but, kind of a frisky South Carolina team that has done some damage to good opponents this year?
Yeah, I think Alabama's. I don't know. I've noticed like just there's a frustration I think with the team, and an eagerness to um, prove themselves again after that kind of embarrassing performance against Vanderbilt. I know a lot of the time was spent this week kind of addressing some of the big headline happenings at the end of Vanderbilt with Malachi Moore. We already kind of went into that, but like a lot of the week was spent with people talking about that. But it's more just kind of looking back and, there's a lot of like what ifs. I know Kalen DeBoer talked about that, whereas there's several like what ifs in this game that it made it extra painful because you look at it and it's, if you change this, they probably win. And there's a ton of those in this game for Vanderbilt. So I think that, it's a lot of reflection, a lot of maybe still kind of licking your wounds a little bit. But then just moving forward, I think Alabama also realizes that they still really control their own destiny. And if they can get things right starting this week against South Carolina, they're right where where they kind of thought they'd be in some aspects. I mean, if you head into the fifth game or the sixth game actually at 4-1, I think a lot of people thought Alabama was going to do that. So the season's not over by any means. They just got to kind of get back on track, and it starts this week.
Yeah, it definitely does. I think the most interesting messaging that stuck out to me was when we were talking to players. Tyler Booker was asked kind of how Kalen DeBoer's demeanor changed, and he gave the answer I think we were all expecting. It's always the same guy. He's this even keel coach who, will put a good win or a bad loss behind him quickly and not really change that much in terms of his approach and all that stuff. And then we talked to Tim Smith, and I asked him the same question, and Tim Smith kind of gave us a little bit more and said, no, there has been a little bit more of an edge to Kalen DeBoer this week. And, I think we've noticed it subtly. Obviously, the guy is incredibly good at keeping his composure, aside from, I guess, when the refs get on his nerves against Georgia. But, he's been good at keeping his composure. But I think he is letting this loss kind of add a little bit more drive this week, which Tim Smith, to quote him, said he thought it was a good thing. He kind of enjoyed seeing DeBoer, get a little bit more animated and understand, like you were saying, the gravity that this game has now against South Carolina, to go out and prove that you still are, the dominant team that you were against Georgia and that you've shown you could be this year. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Any more things in particular stick out just from
I
the
think
players?
it's important that he does that, but at the same time,
Yeah.
he mentioned not, letting it get out of control, or I don't think he needs to go on a tirade or really change his approach too much heading into the South Carolina game. Like his approach, and whether you like it or not, whether you like the the more media access or the friendlier approach or the no swearing or even the shirt that he's wearing on the sideline, like that has worked for him everywhere he's been. For him to just randomly change now because one loss happened, that's kind of silly in my opinion. I think this is a wake up game, but I don't think it's throw the whole playbook out the window game or throw the whole approach out the window game. Like I don't. I think DeBoer has a system that has got him this far, and he really doesn't need to neglect that. Just because a few people are unhappy, regardless of like, in several aspects of his approach.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a balance you have to find, and yeah, I was tempted to wear a suit on this show just to avoid any critiques of my attire in the comment section, because apparently that's on the high priority list of Alabama fans in terms of how to get mad at something for a loss. That's been an interesting piece of discourse. So we'll see what DeBoer rocks is rocking on the sidelines. I think I texted you. I think they just need to turn this into some sort of apparel deal. Some company needs to take advantage of being the official sponsor of what the coach wears or something like that.
Mobley and
But
Sons, right? That's the
yeah,
big outfitter in Tuscaloosa. So maybe that
yeah, maybe they'll get on
Mobley and
that.
Sons, whatever. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, advertising odd right there. Breaking a cardinal sin right there. But
yeah, we'll be on Fit Watch. I'm just kidding. We'll be on Game Watch, which is what matters. On Saturday against South Carolina, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Gamecocks because there's some interesting stats about them out there. They've been a kind of a weird team this year, but I want to revisit something that you talked with Coach Chris Kapilovic, the offensive line coach, on Wednesday, and he brought up a moment in the Vanderbilt game. Of course, when Jalen Milroe gets sacked in the fourth quarter, it was a strip sack. Vanderbilt recovers. That ends up, completely, almost finishing off the game for Vanderbilt. They're able to go down and score, end up winning the game. You talked with Coach Cap about that and about a moment from Elijah Pritchett on that play. What did he have to say? Because it was some interesting kind of developments that happened leading up to that fumble.
yeah, there's just a lot of things that can happen in a game that you don't necessarily see. Even on the play that Coach Cap talked about was not on the television. What happened in that play, where Elijah Pritchett gets blown by and gives up a strip sack to Jalen Milroe. The play before, Alabama completes a pass to Jeremy Bernard. I think it was something like 16 or it was a first down pass to Jeremy Bernard. So they're trying to move fast. They just had two big completions, trying to, run some tempo against Vanderbilt, and a Vanderbilt player kind of elbows Jalen Milroe. And, Elijah Pritchett takes issue with that and then goes over to kind of defend his quarterback. But at the same time, that's kind of slowing Alabama's tempo down. It also prevents Pritchett from being set on the play, and then it leads to the sack, And then there's a couple other things on the play that were just discipline things as well. Is like Pritchett, when he does kind of overextend and fall to the ground and lets his defender past him, he stays on his stomach. And that's another thing that Kapilovic said is like, you get back up on your feet, maybe you're in the position to dive on the ball. But because Pritchett's on his stomach, doesn't have the mobility. The ball comes out. The Vanderbilt player comes up with it. It's like a double fall. You know what I'm saying? It's like you got caught undisciplined, and then you continued it. And there's little things like that. You don't really think about it. But those are the things that I think are really correctable. And the thing that, Cap said is like everyone misses a block. So I don't think there's really upset about Elijah missing that block. Even if he was set, there's a chance he misses a block. Those things they just happen in a game. But it's the discipline of it. It's the getting back up after you fall down. Those kind of things. The fortunate thing for Alabama is those things can be corrected. Those are not talent things. Those are easy fixes if you can fix your mentality. So those are the kind of things that I think this Vanderbilt loss will kind of wake up Alabama with. But yeah, it's crazy how a play, something as slight as getting distracted by a player, a little extra chippiness in between plays can really influence a game. That's the mental discipline you have to have throughout the full 60 minutes. And it's really, you never know when a little lapse in discipline will come up to bite you.
Yeah, it's the little moments, like you said. And obviously, I think Jalen Milroe will appreciate his offensive lineman coming to his defense. But yeah, you have to understand what the moment is and how fast you're trying to go. Like you said, Alabama's trying to get up the field quickly. And then, you're not set, and those little mistakes. I remember reading your story. That's what Kapilovic really emphasized. So,
Yeah, I think
coming
that
off of that,
said was
yeah.
right intentions and wrong moments. It's just, like it's not necessarily bad that you kind of stick up for your quarterback, but like know the moment that you're in.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously that's a learning moment for Pritchett. He's obviously, had a fair bit of those. He's had to work hard to earn his spot this off season, and is still growing as a player at that right tackle position. So it'll be interesting, just kind of segueing off of that, based on what you talked about with Kapilovic, going into this week, what are you expecting kind of just from the offensive line in general? I know Jaden Roberts, he said, had been playing through a couple of knocks, and that was part of the reason why Geno Vandermark got some run against Vanderbilt. So, again, obviously it was key that this unit kind of found continuity early in the season. We saw what they can be. What are you kind of expecting after what you talked with Coach Cap about this week?
Yeah, I don't think that the unit was actually too bad against Vanderbilt. The running game wasn't really apparent because like they were behind. It wasn't there's not apparent, but like the running game wasn't really consistent because they were behind. I mean, I think that when you're down by 2 scores, you're always kind of hesitant to run, and you're trying to run up tempo, and so things are moving a little bit faster. I think Alabama still has the ability to move on the ground. I mean, things need to be improved, but I think you're seeing, an overall good performance from this offensive line. I think it's coming together. That's not necessarily one of the concerns that I would really have about about this team in general, even on offense. So I think that I think there's a general good feeling behind it. And then Jaden Roberts and Geno Vandermark. I mean, like those are two guys that Alabama views as starters. So they. I don't want to say that they're interchangeable because I do think that Jaden Roberts is the preferred guy, but Alabama has a lot of confidence in Geno Vandermark, and so I think that that's something Cap said, and they view him almost as a starter himself. So that just speaks to the kind of the growth of the offensive line and the versatility they have there. You really can't go into an offensive line or into a season with 5 guys and only 5 guys. You got to have people that you can plug in. You talk about Geno Vandermark. I'm sure that they're still working on Wilkin Formby just in case one of the tackles goes down, and he's another guy that they have a lot of faith in too. So I think things are looking pretty good, and it sounds like Kapilovic is pretty confident about that unit moving forward. So I think that's one of the areas where Alabama's building confidence in for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on it. I wanted to segue off of that. The running game for Alabama, another talking point that I don't think we dove into too much when we recap the Vanderbilt game. It was bad against the Commodores. Like you said, we heard some interesting comments from Nick Sheridan and others about, Alabama needed to go with tempo and score quickly because of how much Vanderbilt was holding the ball. That changed the way they were able to approach and kind of prevented them from establishing a run. But it's now been back-to-back games, Tony, where Justice Haynes and Jam Miller have combined for just 11 carries. They had 68 yards against Vandy, 43 yards against Georgia the week prior. Are you worried at all about that kind of trend? Obviously, against Georgia, Jalen Milroe really became the guy, running the football for Alabama, had over 100 yards himself. But against Vandy, that attack was completely bottled up. And that wasn't, of course, Alabama's hand was kind of forced to become one-dimensional. I get that there. But are you worried at all about some of the trends with the running backs, and maybe would you notice Gillespie, maybe Sheridan say about it this week?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily worried, and like to be honest with you, I don't think Alabama did horrible on the ground. I mean, the 21 attempts for 84 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's not that's not terrible. Especially when you consider how many times did Vanderbilt had 2 sacks. So, I mean, that's gonna take out some of those yards too. So I think you're probably over 100 yards. I think you're probably averaging 5 yards a carry if you take out sacks. So I don't hate it. It just you know if you're not going to get Jalen Milroe the ball, then you're going to have to get the running backs more carries. I mean, like Jam Miller had 5 carries for 45 yards, and Justice Haynes had 6 carries for 23 yards. Neither of those are bad, but I mean, like you got to get the running game more involved. I think you just kind of said it. It had to do with tempo. It had to do with being 2 scores behind, and that's just the frustrating part about that Vanderbilt game is I think that you've heard a lot of the coaches say like this was a game that they thought they were going to be able to run the ball really well, and they kind of did. And I know that Vanderbilt did a good job of containing Jalen Milroe, but if you're going to contain Jalen Milroe, it might open up the game for some of the running backs. I think that Alabama did it. I don't think I'm necessarily concerned over Alabama's ability to run the ball. It's just a matter of like in that situation, they didn't, because I think they um, they didn't want to go on these long drives and run out of game. That's a interesting tactic as well. I mean, there's an argument that Alabama should have just bit the bullet and gone on a long drive. Tired out Vanderbilt, trusted its defense to make a stop. Even though you're down by 2 scores, you go on a long drive, you trust that running game, you get it going, you score, you give your defense more, rest, and maybe the defense gets that stop. I wonder, was there an apprehension to do that because you just didn't trust your defense? Like
Mhm.
I think if you trusted your defense fully and you're in the third quarter and you could take off like 7 minutes of clock on a running drive because you can run the ball down Vanderbilt's throat. Do you do that knowing that, hey, we still have a quarter and a half to where our defense is going to get a stop and we can do this again? You can do that if you have faith in your defense. If you don't, you start wondering, is that 7 minutes going to be worth it? What if Vanderbilt comes back and scores right away, and then we're screwed? We can't. We've got to score fast. So I think there's points to both sides of that argument. Obviously, Alabama tried to do more up tempo stuff, and its defense. I think regardless of how quick they were moving, I think that their defense needed to make more of a stop. But I do think that they could have ran the ball a lot more effectively had they just committed to doing so. 21 attempts is not that many.
Yeah, definitely not. I think it's just to me, the concern just comes of, yeah, it was a team that very clearly figured out a way to make Alabama one dimensional. And like you said, it was in part doing it on its own offensive drives, taking so much time off, tiring the defense out. But yeah, I wonder if Alabama approaches one of those drives differently, where you give your defense some more rest by staying on the field longer on offense, and you do that by establishing the run game. I think to me, what really stuck out, when we talked to Robert Gillespie, was just kind of that he's trying to preach sort of this unselfishness in the running back group. I mean, we kind of saw it a little bit against Georgia. I mean, it was clearly Jalen Milroe was able to have his way running the football against them. And Alabama sort of leaned into that. And instead, Jam Miller and Justice Haynes did well on blocking. Jam Miller caught a nice touchdown pass from Jalen Milroe, in that game, and blocked really well. So, I think it's just they're willing to sacrifice whatever they have to do to get the win. But the concern for me comes that didn't happen on Saturday, and you're going to face much better teams than Vanderbilt, and you have to kind of get that going.
And I know they're not being. I know they're being very, patient, and they're being good teammates. But I can't imagine that either of Justice Haynes or Jam Miller is excited about getting 5 or 6 carries a game. Like they probably need to touch the ball a little bit more than that. At least probably double that for probably both of them. I mean, you at least got to get them at least 8 to 10 carries a game, or really maybe even 15. But yeah, I just think it's a circumstance thing. I don't necessarily think I'm worried about it, and I think that's probably what that's how Justice and Jam are kind of they kind of know what had happened in that game. So we'll be interesting to see if South Carolina tries to slow the game down a little bit too. If that's just a way to beat Alabama, is to kind of eat up clock. We'll have to see, but I expected a different approach on offense, moving forward for sure.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting in a new kind of circumstance. And we can segue off of that and get into South Carolina, because this is a defense that can certainly bottle up the run game in a similar fashion to Vandy, or I guess they can take some more pride in doing it on defense versus just having the ball for a million years. Robert Gillespie asked him, he said this is probably one of the best defensive lines we faced all year. He described their linebackers as thumpers, which I think I've heard that before, but that term made me laugh. And those are all good things. He said, and those are all good things because you want to be able to face uh, and get tested against a really good opponent. So a few names I'll highlight on South Carolina, and it particularly goes down to their edge rushers. They have 2 studs on the outside who can both bottle up the run game and get to the quarterback. They've got Dylan Stewart, who is a 5-star true freshman, 12 tackles, 3.5 sacks. He has 2 forced fumbles and a fumble recovery already. And then their other edge rushers, a guy named Kyle Kennard, who is a transfer from Georgia Tech, 10 tackles. He's up to 5.5 sacks already, a pass deflection, and 2 forced fumbles. I was reading about him I think, a legit NFL draft prospect in Kennard. They also have a defensive tackle named TJ Sanders, who has 22 tackles and a sack. This team could generate some pressure against Alabama, Tony. And how do you kind of expect the Tide to maybe approach that and try and counter that? This is going to be a big test for the offensive
Yeah,
line
it's a
this week.
solid South Carolina defense. I mean, they ranked 22nd in total defense, and I think they're in the 30s for both rushing defense, and 32 for rushing defense, and I'm pretty sure it's like something like 34 for passing defense. 34 for passing defense. So I mean, like this is a really balanced South Carolina defense. So it's going to be tough. I think as far as combating it, I think it's just doing the right things. Being sound in the pass protection, like you said, and then just not getting too one dimensional. Because I think that a complete defense like the one that they're going to face can really limit you if you abandon the running game, or even if you if you can't get things going through the air. Fortunately for Alabama, I kind of see, like I said, I'm not really worried about the running game, and I've seen a lot of growth in the passing game. So I think they'll be able to combat things pretty well. I mean, like you've seen Jalen Milroe. One of the best parts of Alabama's loss for Vanderbilt that kind of gets overshadowed now is Jalen Milroe did pretty well again in the intermediate passing game, and he was finding tight ends again. And so like that whole kind of that's slowly becoming, that big flaw in his passing attack is slowly, being filled in, and he's playing a lot better, and that's really encouraging. It's kind of easy to skip over that when you lose, but I don't think Jalen really did too much wrong. He had an interception. He missed a few plays, but I mean, like you look at his stats, 19 of 25 for 312 yards. I mean, like, could it have been better? Yeah, he could have been better, but he definitely wasn't the fault. And I think you're still seeing an improvement in his game. So once again, everything kind of runs through him. But I'm encouraged by him. And I like I said, I think the offensive line is progressing. Like I said, I don't really think that the offense was at fault against Vanderbilt. So it's a tough test, but Alabama has a tough offense, and I'd still take Alabama's offense over, a really solid South Carolina defense. I mean, this South Carolina team might not be the same on offense, but defensively, it is a pretty. You're talking up there with that kind of Georgia level defense, not quite, but in that realm of like elite defenses. If you're a top 25 defense, you're doing things right.
Yeah, they have some dudes. It's just they're really athletic, kind of fearless in the attack on defense. And I'm curious, I mean, if you want a makeup opportunity, Elijah Pritchett, here you go, going up against these edge rushers coming on the outside. So him and Caden Proctor, to me, will have to be really big in terms of stopping the pass rush, because that, I think, will start to cause Alabama problems.
And they really rose to the occasion against Georgia. So I mean,
Mhm.
I think it's one of those things that they're going to be very aware that this is an elite group of pass rushers, and I think they're going to take their game to the next level.
I will ask this about Alabama briefly before we touch on, like you said, South Carolina's offense, which is safe to say not as strong as its defense. The other guy I'll shout out for the Gamecocks on defense, also one of the best names, I think, in college football, O'Donnell Fortune. He's their star kind of defensive back. He got knocked out of the Ole Miss game. He's listed as probable, so if he plays, that's another guy that Alabama will have to account for, and it looks like he'll probably suit up. But on that note, Tony, injury wise, what was Alabama's latest kind of report? Seems like the Tide might get their two wide receivers maybe back, and then we had a Yanzi Pierre injury as well.
Well, with Yanzi Pierre, it looks like he had some kind of surgery. He posted something on Instagram and said, he was coming back, and obviously now he's listed as out. Kobe Prentice is kind of going through a concussion protocol. You would imagine, that's just a matter of him kind of passing, the protocol. And then Kendrick Law was a guy that was, in question, last week. So it'd be interesting to just kind of see, if he comes back. Those two are both listed as questionable, and Yanzi Pierre is listed as out. I could see maybe the receivers coming back. I mean, it just kind of depends. I don't necessarily think Alabama really I think they can survive without them. You can say that's for so much. I mean, losing another one would be big, but I still think Alabama has the ability and the depth to live without them. So you don't have to necessarily rush any of them back, but it'll be interesting to monitor. It'd be nice to get one of them back, maybe, especially, I think Kendrick Law, when you look at all the stuff he does, even when he doesn't get the ball in his hands, it is what he does as a blocker and his ability to kind of impact the game in a variety of ways, maybe even as an end around, picking a handoff, that kind of stuff. I think it'd be nice to get him back. But once again, we'll just have to wait. I don't think Alabama needs to rush either of those two. No disrespect to South Carolina, but I don't think that either of those two are going to really impact this game enough that you risk, complicating things any further.
Yeah, I mean, with Prentice, it's just more if the timeline, I guess, adds up with it's more black and white than maybe Kendrick Law with him coming back. So we'll see. And then Pierre, obviously, yeah, we'll try and get more word on him after this week. That's what DeBoer said, is they'll kind of continue to evaluate. And then, like I said, on the South Carolina side, O'Donnell Fortune. I just want to say his name again because it's just such a great name. But yeah, he's also, I would be remiss to not mention him for South Carolina's defense. Speaking of that side of the ball, Tony, I think Alabama fans might have our next. We've gone 26 minutes without really talking too much about the Tide's defense other than in general terms, but a possible opportunity to have a big bounce back game, especially on the defensive line. I know you know these two stats. I'll share them. South Carolina is, I guess, technically last in the country in both sacks and tackles for loss per game. They allow nearly 4.5 sacks per game and over 9 tackles for loss to its opponents so far. That's really bad.
That's not
And
good
this,
at all. Yeah.
no, this Alabama defensive unit is hungry for a bounce back game. Do you think they'll have it, particularly in the trenches against South Carolina, an offensive line that has not looked good?
That's going to be important, and I think not only just getting those tackles for loss and sacks is really pressuring the quarterback and forcing them into to bad plays. Alabama hasn't had they didn't have a turnover against Vanderbilt. They haven't had a not all season, a non-offensive touchdown. I think that the fans are hungry for both of those things. I think when you get against a team that allows that much pressure and allows you to get into the backfield, those open up the opportunity for turnovers. They open up the opportunity for non-offensive touchdowns, and I think those things can really get the defense back on track and rolling. When you look at the Vanderbilt loss, it's kind of like Alabama was paying for the problems that it had against South Florida, where it lost the turnover battle. It was wasn't disciplined, and they got away with some of that stuff. And you left that South Florida game thinking, oh wow, you really shouldn't have been able to win a game where you did all this stuff, but it was South Florida. And now you play an SEC team, you make those mistakes, and they get punished more, even though it's Vanderbilt. This Vanderbilt team still an SEC team and still capable of punishing you. That being said, I think it's a chance for Alabama to kind of correct its mistakes. Like you said, they can, provide that pressure, force an interception. And I think you just build off of that. Those kind of things just snowball. You get a sack, all of a sudden, you get a sack and it becomes, a 3rd and 18 instead of a 3rd and 7. And then you get that 3rd down stop and, you kind of break this trend of giving up 3rd downs. And those things can really help, and I just think Alabama needs a little bit of momentum. And this is kind of the offense, they can't just roll in there and think that they're going to just get free sacks. But at the same time, I think this is kind of the offense that will provide some of those opportunities and maybe, generate some confidence for Alabama. And because I think the talent's there, I think they need more confidence. I think they need things to kind of start rolling their way a little bit more. And I think this is the kind of opportunity that they've been calling for.
Yeah, it's like to use basketball terms, it's like just a guard who's waiting to just see a shot go through the net, and then it kind of goes from there. I think it's a super, maybe not super underappreciated, but how important that Damani Jackson interception against Georgia was at the beginning of that game, just to sort of set the tone. I think you're right. I think they go out and get a sack or two on the first drive, and then it's 3rd and 16 instead of a 3rd and 7, where everyone in that stadium, including the players, are going to be thinking, here we go again, another 3rd down that they'll, 3rd medium that they won't be able to get off the field. I think could really snowball, like South Carolina can kind of do some interesting things. I know we're talking to some people from their side of things, and they've got Robbie Ashford, a kind of mobile quarterback who they use sometimes in packages. Raheem Sanders, a player maybe we should mention a little bit more because Alabama fans know him very well. He can get going on the ground, but it just doesn't feel like this South Carolina offensive line has what it takes to hold up, or shouldn't have what it takes to hold up against an Alabama pass rush and defensive line. I think you're right. And early, even if it's a forced fumble that South Carolina falls on, just getting, like Kane Womack says, those turnover opportunities, those sacks, those pressures on your home field kind of gets things going. I think that's what I expect on Saturday.
The college football script writers, if they're doing their job, are going to have a Malachi Moore strip sack leading to an offensive touchdown. And that's just going to be like the ultimate character arc right there. So I'm going to do them a favor, and that's the storyline. First drive, Malachi Moore strip sack, Brian Denny goes crazy. He kind of redeems himself. Yeah.
I like it. There's definitely good script writing opportunity, man. Yeah, the crowd would, I think, go wild if that winds up happening. I mean, he had a forced fumble against Wisconsin. He's
a guy that can do a strip sack. I mean, like that's certainly, like right up his alley. So
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's, I think, a notable thing. To watch this South Carolina's offensive line, not very good. And with that, now that we've talked a little bit about the Gamecocks, got ourselves informed, we'll do predictions time. It was not a good week last week for either of us. If you dare let me refresh your memory, Tony, I picked Alabama to win 42-3. Vanderbilt, safe to say, had those points covered very, very fast. You technically had the better pick. You had Alabama winning 38-10. So you were closer by default, I suppose. But neither of us were very close. And then credit to you, back-to-back weeks now against Georgia, you had Jahad Campbell as a player to watch. And then you picked Jam Miller, and we talked about the running game, but Jam Miller, 2 touchdowns. So not a, totally disappearing performance. I had Red Morgan. I can't say I remember really any Red Morgan contributions. I thought this would maybe be
on the Red Morgan watch.
I thought there'd be maybe some garbage time opportunity, and of course there was no garbage time in this game because of the way it went.
Get a solo tackle for you.
All right. Well, let's see if I can do better this week. I have my prediction and player to watch ready. Would you like me to go first while you're thinking, or do you have it locked and loaded?
I don't have an actual score prediction, so why don't I formulate that while you go with your first? Okay. I have my player to watch, but
okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll share mine first. Hopefully, we didn't pick the same player to watch, but otherwise, one of us we can debate, or we can just have the same one. I wound up going Alabama 35, South Carolina 10. It might be a little bit of a risk. I know Alabama has put up a lot of points this season. They've scored over. I guess Vanderbilt was the first time they were under 40 all season. But I think it'll be a big game for the defense. Maybe maybe South Carolina tries the Vanderbilt thing and wastes some time early. But I think Alabama will take over, not allow much more than 10 points. And then my player to watch, I went along that theme of the defensive line. I went with Tim Smith. I enjoyed talking with him this week. He looked pretty fired up. I asked him if he sought any advice from anybody, just talking through the Vanderbilt game and how you bounce back. His response was just, Jesus Christ, I have no other answer. So
it's a strong answer, though.
It's a great answer. No, I loved it.
Yeah.
I just just leaning on the Lord for that one. So Tim Smith, I will pick him for those reasons, and I just think he could feast on a bad Vandy O-line. But 35-10, Tim Smith, player of the game.
I'm going to go. I almost want to go 38-10 again, but you know what? That's just a bad luck score now for Alabama, and I don't want to be like caught up in any like accusations of bad juju or anything like that. So I will go. Trying to think of I will go 34 to 10. 34-10. I'll go one. Yeah.
So 1 point less than mine.
Yeah.
Love
1 point less than yours. I'm just trying to play the odds here.
Yeah, you're hedging you're doing the Price is Right thing.
Yeah, I like South Carolina's defense. I think you got 4 touchdowns, 2 Graham Nicholson field goals, which like just never happen anymore. But
yeah,
we're gonna ride
non-factor.
Yeah.
He's been a
So I
non-factor.
think he probably gets on the board twice. Just trying to get him involved. My player of the game. I'm surprised you didn't take this with your stat about tackles for losses and like I did mention Malachi Moore, and I figured I was gonna have to take Malachi Moore, not because you were gonna take the person that I was gonna take, but I'm gonna go with Q Robinson as my player of the game.
Mhm.
He had 3 tackles for a loss against Vanderbilt. He's got 6.5 on the year and 3.5 sacks. He's quietly having a great season. And against a South Carolina team that likes to let defenders in the backfield, I think Q Robinson could feast. I mean, could be another big game. And look, if he has another 3 tackle for a loss game, we're going to be talking about him in a different manner than we have. He's been kind of slept on. Alabama's defense was pretty bad against Vanderbilt. I think you really can't credit Q Robinson to any of that. He had a great game against Vanderbilt, just was kind of overshadowed by some of the poor performances around him. I think he continues that. I think he has a good game against South Carolina, adds maybe even a couple more tackles for a loss, gets a sack. Who knows? Maybe he forces a turnover, but I think he's going to have a big game. So I'll ride the momentum wave with him.
I like the take. I think he could definitely have a good game. I think it'll be someone on this defensive end. I think it's Vanderbilt's O line's really bad, but we'll see who kind of emerges. All right, there we go. Those are locked in. We will see what emerges on Saban Field. This is the first time. Obviously, Vanderbilt was the first time we both got the score wrong and predicted the wrong team to win. Against Georgia, you did have the Bulldogs in that one, but that's been our only other time. So we'll see. I mean, obviously, I guess I kind of have to root for the over to hit now because of your score prediction. So
I kind
we'll
of
see.
like when I was like still searching for a thing. I kind of forgot that you said 35, but it's a dirty move by me. But that's why I get to go second. So
That's
yeah.
okay. Yeah, no, that you made the strategic decision. I can only respect it. All right, we did this as its own segment, and it's on our YouTube from last week, which maybe cursed us because in a chaotic week of college football for our college football picks elsewhere, we both did very bad. We of course pick 5 games every week. We've got 5 good ones lined up here for week 7, but week 6 revisiting quickly. We picked Missouri against Texas A&M. You and I both went with the Tigers. They got
Mhm.
absolutely decimated. That team is really bad. So, we learned a lesson the hard way there. Ole Miss against South Carolina. You did rock with the Gamecocks to cover a 9-point spread. Ole Miss won that game 27-3. I did pick the Rebels, so I got that one right. Central Florida against Florida. Not a good day for the Knights in Gainesville. Big win for the Gators. It was UCF -2 going in. You picked Florida. I picked UCF. You got that one right. The Natty rematch. We split on this one as well. Washington, Michigan. It was Washington by 1.5, and the Huskies pulling the upset against the number 10 Wolverines, sent them plummeting down the AP poll. So I got that one right. And then Auburn actually managed to cover against Georgia, the 22-point spread. So we both got that one wrong that week because we both went with the Bulldogs. So yeah, shout out to Washington. Thanks, Kalen DeBoer's old stomping ground. Michigan's real bad. Fell like 12 spots down the AP poll after that week. So did Missouri, dropped a lot too.
Not great.
Anyway, let's move on from that mess of a week because we got a fun one to predict this week. Week 7 is a huge college football week. Last week was supposed to be just kind of a primer, and then it ended up turning into chaos with so many top teams losing. But week 7, I will start in the SEC, which sounds weird because this is a game until this season that was a Big 12 matchup. We're going to the Red River rivalry, the Cotton Bowl, number 1 Texas, number 18 Oklahoma. Oklahoma is technically the home team for this game, even though it's in a neutral site. However, it is the Longhorns. That's going to be a theme. Home underdogs is theme this week. The Longhorns, 14.5-point favorites against Oklahoma. This game always gets kind of weird for me, I feel like. Who do you like? Do you like the Longhorns covering a pretty big spread against a
Yeah, so
Oklahoma
this is a
team?
tough one for me because I'm a Texas native. I do appreciate the Longhorns. I do think that they're going to win the game. My best friend, OU grad, so I'm going to roll with him. I do not think that this is a weird game, okay? I think Texas wins this one, but 14.5 is a ton for a neutral game and a rivalry game. And like Oklahoma has a decent defense, and like I think Texas played a Michigan team that I think is probably overrated and got, I think a lot of people are still riding on that. I'm not trying to say that Texas is overrated, but I don't think 14.5 against OU. I think the Sooners, I think that's too many points to give the Sooners. So I'm picking them with the points. But like, they're probably still going to lose, just not by 4.
Yeah, I like your logic. I just feel like this game always produces kind of fun, weird results. I mean, there was the Caleb Williams game a couple years ago. But I do like to have parity in these picks. So I will rock with the Longhorns to make a statement. After a week of college football that was chaotic, another week that can produce some big results, Texas emerges as kind of a consistent, this is the best team in the country, and everyone's kind of chasing them. Give me the Longhorns to cover in this one. I'm not super confident in that pick, but I'll go with it just because why not? Next up, Ole Miss against LSU, a 3.5 point favorite. The Rebels on the road against the Tigers. This is an interesting one.
So the Rebels are the favorites on the road.
Yep.
Oh man, I don't like this one because I don't like. I think Ole Miss is probably overrated and LSU's overrated. I'm still gonna take Ole Miss here. There's just too much talent, and I don't love LSU. So I think I'm taking Ole Miss, even though it's on the road. Tiger Stadium's a tough place to play, but I'm going to go with Lane to kind of right the ship. It looks like they played a lot better against South Carolina, so yeah, we'll go with Lane, and I'll ride the Lane train with Ole Miss.
They haven't played too many teams. They survived a scare against South Carolina. LSU did, but they've looked pretty good since that 27-20 loss to USC at the beginning of the year. That said, I think I'm going to rock with you. I picked Ole Miss as my dark horse SEC team. That got a little bit.
The South Carolina team's not. Look at how both teams did against South Carolina, right? I mean, that should be obvious.
Very good point. Yeah, that can be a good enough indicator. I'll go with Ole Miss right there with you as well. Next game, we're going to go out to LA. I just mentioned USC. Number 4 Penn State, 4-point favorites on the road, going to face the Trojans. An unranked USC team, that has floundered a little bit. But Penn State, I feel like, I don't know, they like USC lost to Minnesota last week. I feel like everyone's been trying to figure out a way to pick Penn State to lose a game. I don't know about you. Do you like maybe USC either keeping this close or maybe pulling an upset?
Another game of teams I'm not super high on. 4.5 for Penn State.
Just four. I think.
Just 4. You know what? I'm going to go with the Trojans here. I'm going to go with Lincoln Riley. I hate picking with Lincoln Riley, but I think that they need this win to kind of stop the bleeding. And it's at home. I think Penn State's kind of overrated at the moment. It's a long trip to make. Give me the Trojans on this one to pull it off. I'm even going to have them win outright. I know it doesn't really count as anything, but yeah.
No, I like putting it out there. I mean, everyone in the Big Ten is currently chasing Indiana, so it's just kind of chaos. I should have put an Indiana. I'll put an Indiana game on here later this year if they keep winning for sure. I think I'm going to be different. I completely agree with you. I kind of hate both of these teams. I mean, Penn State it feels like it never works out for them, and I don't know why this year should be an exception, but they've won all the games they've needed to so far. They've got 2 kind of interesting road tests, USC, Wisconsin, and then that huge game against number 2 Ohio State in a couple of weeks. I'm going to have them get through this one, though, in LA, just to, again, kind of provide a little bit of parity. We'll go with the Nittany Lions. Not confident at all in that pick, so this could end up being rough for me, but we shall see. I think their defense is good. They can slow down USC. Next one. Number 18, Kansas State, 4.5 point favorites on the road against a 4-1 Colorado team that I looked at their schedule, and if they can pull this one off, they can rattle off some wins and maybe all of a sudden make some noise somehow, maybe even more than they were making last year when they were much worse. What do you like in this game? I realized I hadn't put Colorado on the pick spread yet, and I kind of wanted to include them for a game.
Yeah, I like the chaos of Colorado being good and the kind of like drama it brings. There's a lot of hate or love. They're a very polarizing team, and maybe I'm just going with my heart here, just because I like a little bit of drama. But I'm going to go with Colorado to win this one and to really become a playoff contender and really rile up some people. So give me Dion and give me the Buffs. That's a wild conference. I think every game pretty much in that conference is a coin flip. So I don't know. I'll go with vibes, and I kind of want to see some storylines, and I know that they'll provide them for the rest of the year.
Colorado, just for reference, if they win this game, they'll be 5-1. Then they have games against Arizona, Cincinnati, and Texas Tech. They very well could be rocking up back at home against number 16 Utah with College game day at 8-1, and all of a sudden that game is for the probably outright leader in the Big 12. So
they also could like randomly lose any of those other
definitely
games. Yeah. So like it's really, I could see Colorado winning this game and everyone like setting them up and then them just totally losing their head and then losing to some random team. But yeah.
I just wonder if it could still get interesting later on. I also really like Kansas State. I think they're a good team. They're well coached. I think they're having a pretty good season. Had a tough one against Nebraska. I guess they didn't play Nebraska. I'm looking at Colorado's schedule because, of course, they lost to Nebraska in the battle of the up and comers, I suppose. I mean, Kansas State lost to a good BYU team, but I also love some drama. I'm going to go with Colorado too. I kind of want the hype to start, and then maybe you're right. They just drop one to Texas Tech, and then it all falls
they'll
off the wagon
definitely
again.
They'll definitely let the hype get to their heads. But yeah.
All right, I'll go with Colorado. I'll match you on that one. Last game, and this is a fun one. You knew we were going to pick this one. Number 2 Ohio State going into Eugene, Oregon as 3-point favorites against the Mighty Ducks. Who do you like in this one? This is a huge game in the Big Ten, setting up who can maybe be the dominant team right behind Texas.
Seth McLaughlin going into one of the loudest stadiums in the nation. I'm sure Alabama fans are going to be watching that one like sharks. No, I actually like the Buckeyes big here. I think that I think they're one of the big time contenders in college football, and they just haven't been tested yet. But they've handled their business throughout every game that they've played. This is the first big test. I know traveling out to Oregon's especially not really after having played anyone, is going to be really tough. But I just think talent-wise, Ohio State's at a different level, and I expect them to easily. I mean, I'm expecting a double-digit win over Oregon.
Okay, so you like Ohio State big on the road. Yeah, I'm for sure going to be different here. Give me the Ducks. I'm not at all confident on this. I also think Ohio State is phenomenally talented. But you know what? I'll stand on the podium for Oregon to play devil's advocate here. After a narrow 3-point win over Boise State, they have rocked through their schedule. They blew out Oregon State, blew out UCLA, blew out Michigan State. I know those are all nobody teams. But you know what? I like the Ducks. Dylan Gabriel, he may be short, but he can throw that football. He'll make some plays. They'll eke out a win. They're at home. If this was in Ohio, if this was in Columbus, I would agree with you.
You're taking the Ducks outright.
I'll take the Ducks. Yeah, sure. Why not? I mean, it's only a 3-point game, so it's close enough that they might as well just win it, right? Evan Stewart, their wide receiver, transfer from A&M, I'm a big fan of. He hasn't had too good of a start to the season. Maybe he has a big game. When Ohio State wins this by 20, I can, get all the hate comments, but I'm gonna go with Oregon. I'm going to be a little different just to play devil's advocate. So again, to recap, Texas, Oklahoma, I got the Horns. You got OU covering, not winning. We both picked Ole Miss over LSU. Both picked Colorado over Kansas State. I picked Penn State to cover on the road against USC. You've got the Trojans, and I went with Oregon to defend home turf against the Buckeyes, coming in as favorites. This will be fun. I'm excited for this week of college football. It's going to be a good week. Yeah,
it's a good week. I didn't look at the times, but it's a good. I feel like it's going to be a good week for Alabama to play at 11.
Yes, you can watch this game, get to the bar and watch, most of the second halves of the afternoon games, go home and unwind with some late night football. Yeah, you can have yourself a weekend.
The bar, Brian needs to step up because Vanderbilt gave us beers after the game. That's an unexpected little perk on our trip to Nashville. That would be a
game.
I don't expect that to happen, but it'd be nice. Greg Brennan.
It would be nice. Yeah, that's our call to action. Yeah, I enjoyed a Montucky cold snack after with a hard game to process and write about, and it made it well worth it. Um, Before we finish things off, Tony, let's talk a little hoops to close out the show because, of course, Alabama football is in full swing. Tide have some expectations, but this show is going to come out on Friday. Some of you maybe watching this might be heading to Coleman Coliseum, of course, Friday night for the Crimson Tide's banner unveiling. Yes, we are also angry that they're doing a banner unveiling at 8:30 at night, right before an 11 a.m. football game. You are
That
not
is the
alone
most
in that
ridiculous
regard.
decision.
But nevertheless, it is happening. It will be an exciting event. And Alabama basketball tips off in 25 days. They play UNC Asheville on November 4th. They've got a couple exhibition games before that. We've talked about the excitement a little bit on this show, earlier months in the offseason and stuff. Just how excited are you, Tony, one to cover to see a Final Four banner go up for the first time ever in Coleman? And just, we've seen this team play a little bit. It's going to be an exciting year for Tide hoops.
The women did go to the Final Four, so will not be the first.
My bad.
Yep.
My bad. Hand up.
Not be the first Final Four banner in Coleman. So
hand up.
Apologies to the women's basketball program, but no, it'll be very exciting. It's something Alabama, men's basketball fans have been waiting for a long time. Obviously, Auburn has that big display in their outside of their arena, and I think it's one of those things that it'll be nice for Alabama fans to see that every time that they walk into Coleman. And it's going to be an exciting team too. I think, along with seeing that banner display, I think a lot of people are excited to see what this team's going to look like just on the court. And, we're going to get to see a little bit of a slam dunk competition and just get to see the players in uniform. So that'll be interesting to see. And I think another good thing that, we wrote about, and this is coming on a Friday. So yesterday, a Thursday, was your piece about kind of comparing the two rosters, Jack. And I was just I thought maybe it'd be fun to go kind of bring that up and let's go take a look at last year to this year, So I guess we can start off with point guard, which is the same, which is Mark Sears, but you have 2003 Mark Sears against 2004 Mark Sears. Which one would you take?
Well, 2003 and 2004 Mark Sears, I think, would be about 2 and 1 year old. So I would go 2020.
I mean, sorry, 2023. Yeah.
2024.
My bad.
I was waiting till that clicked. It's interesting. I think what you're going to see when I wrote about this is going to be interesting about Mark Sears is just kind of how his scoring differentiates. I mean, he was their go-to number one guy. Grant Nelson couldn't really play the role that he wanted to play, and I think that affected his scoring. He's going to be in a better spot. There's more talent around Mark Sears, and I wonder if that kind of just changes where his production goes. He was top 15 in scoring and I think barely in the top 150 in assists, and I wonder if those two numbers just kind of move a little closer together this season. And that's not to say he'll be worse. I just wonder if it's a different kind of Mark Sears where he's doing a little bit more facilitating. He's also going to, frankly, Tony, be able to sit out of games for longer. That was a big thing Nate Oates said last year, was that there were times they wanted to take Mark Sears out of the basketball game and they couldn't do it because they didn't have any front court depth. They've got plenty of that this year. And naturally, if his minutes go down just a little bit because you're just resting him, he's obviously going to be the go-to guy in the clutch for Alabama. To be able to save him in some of those middle portions of the game, I think it's going to be big. So I don't think Mark Sears will be worse than he was last year by any means, but I think it'll be sort of different player that we get to see. That's what I'm.
Well, I think if you're going back and you're looking at the stats at the end of both seasons, you're going to pick 2023.
You might, yeah.
2023 Mark Sears, but I don't think it's going to matter. I don't think he needs to be as statistically good. So, I guess if I was picking, I think I would pick Mark Sears from last year than this year, but I don't necessarily think it's going to be that much of a difference. So it's not I don't think it's going to hurt the team. So next up would be, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, but it would be Latrell Wrightsell against Aaron Estrada. Well, other way around. Aaron Estrada from 2023, and now that would be Latrell Wrightsell Jr. Who do you have for that?
Yeah, again, two players, they brought something a little bit different last year, and I think I would take Latrell Wrightsell. I think just as a pure fit, in Oates' system, he was the best 3-point shooter on the team last year. He's really good off ball, really good on ball. Aaron Estrada, was, I think, a lot maybe better of an all-around guard. He was almost a triple-double machine every game. He could pass, he could distribute, he could rebound. But I think Latrell just gives you a little bit more of what Oates is probably looking for from a number 2 guard next to Mark Sears. I mean, you're going to have Latrell Wrightsell just running around hitting threes, and then when he does need to be the lead guard, he can still do that. Estrada was a good player. He had good defensive upside, but so did Latrell Wrightsell. This is a guy that averaged over a steal a game. When he was the guy in his last year at Cal State Fullerton, he averaged almost 1.5 steals per game. So I expect that production to go up. I'll probably take Trelly, over Estrada.
He's probably the best perimeter defender on the team last year. And then, you look to, I think it kind of goes to your point. If Mark Sears is getting more of those assists, then that, he can kind of take over some of that role for Aaron Estrada. So I think that I agree with you. I'd probably take Trelly as well, just from that 3-point percentage. Perimeter defense, the dude never misses a free throw. Yeah, I think that having him and Mark Sears kind of next to each other as 3-point shooters could be really deadly. So give me that.
I think an underrated part of Latrell's game too is his straight line driving is really good. There was something I talked to his coach at Fullerton, and he was kind of like, yeah, he hasn't been able to do that just because he was a 6th man last year, and I think with more of an offensive role, you'll see that more. He can kind of get to the rim as like a little bit as well, so I think he'll add that to his game. It'll be really good.
So next we have from 2023, Rylan Griffin, who's now went from Kansas. And there's a lot of ways we could do the third guard on this. We could, Chris Youngblood's hurt. Darren Reed's a freshman who would be more of a forward. You went with LeBaron Philon, who, funnily enough, was a Kansas commit that came to Alabama. So we'll go Rylan Griffin or LeBaron Philon just for the sake of argument. Who do you got?
Yeah, between those two specifically, I went with Rylan Griffin. I think he was the biggest probably loss on this team, or Mark Sears would have been if he stayed in the draft. But I think Griffin gives you something. He was a 6'7" kind of guard forward hybrid who could defend multiple positions. I think there's something to be said when you're weighing him against the freshman and Philon about experience too. He's gone up against SEC defenders. He's proven it. He can hit threes. He can play off ball. I think he'll be a good addition for Kansas, quite frankly, and what he can kind of bring them. But I would probably go with him over Philon. That's not to say Philon will be bad. I mean, I've got him as a potential starter in this team. He's gotten a ton of buzz this offseason. Really good shooter, has already gotten some praise for his defensive upside. But I think if you're talking about kind of having some versatility defensively and some just experience in a returning junior, who was a starter last year, I think you definitely would have liked to have that if you were Alabama, when we're talking about the spoil of riches that they have on their roster. But Philon's got some great potential on this team. I really think he can have a big year one based on what we've been hearing.
Yeah, I think his ceiling is higher than Rylan Griffin's ceiling. I think currently Rylan would be a stronger, at the beginning of the season, especially just having that veteran and having that versatility, like you said. So I guess, you know what though? I'm going to be different from you. I'm actually going to take Philon just for the potential. I think you're going for the tournament, and I think by the time that they play in March, in April, I think Philon will be. Could very well be a better player than Rylan Griffin, and that's where Alabama's expectations are. They have enough players to kind of help nurture a young player, and I think you're going to want that potential to hit at the right time. So give me Philon for Alabama or for this.
His upside's fun. I mean, I've watched some highlights of him. He's really good. He takes pride in his defense. He can hit threes. He can drive really well. I mean, again, it's got to translate into a physical SEC, but yeah, definitely the potential is right there for sure.
Next one is another guy versus himself matchup where you've got Grant Nelson of last season and Grant Nelson of this season.
Yeah, I think in these next two positions, I think it's clearly Grant Nelson for this season. I think you're already seeing it. You watched it against UConn, and I think even against Clemson, when Nick Pringle was able to kind of gain control at the center position, we saw what true number 4 Grant Nelson can do. And it's scary. I mean, this guy was voted preseason All-SEC first team before last year. Didn't really live up to that. I think he was, kind of just had to be plugged into a lot of roles. It was a kind of a thin, weird, bad defensive front court for Alabama. And I think Nelson couldn't really get comfortable anywhere on the floor. He's going to be able to do that this season. I think you're going to see him as a true four. He's going to be able to play that position his majority of the time on the floor. And it's scary. I mean, look up the dunk against Donovan Clingan. When Grant Nelson, he can do things that other 6'10 guys can't do. He can take the ball and go against you one-on-one like a guard. And doing that against slow, big, clunky forwards is going to just yield, I think, a lot of success for him. Watching him in the first practice, he was running some like high screen actions with Clifford Omeroy. And I'm like, these are two 6'10 plus guys, running like two guard actions at the top of the key. Like, I think it could be terrifying potentially for Grant. I love what he brings this year.
Am I just totally misremembering it, or was he the guy that got the game-winning shot?
Yes, he hit the game winner. Yeah, at the end of the scrimmage.
I mean, no, I'm not going to waste too much time on this one because I agree with all the points you made. I think with a more established center, which we're about to get to, Grant Nelson's game is just going to take it to another level, and I think he's going to be more like I don't think it's a case of I think it's we talked about Mark Sears' numbers aren't going to be maybe as high this year. I think Grant Nelson's numbers are going to be higher this year because he's going to be doing more of the stuff that's going to be right up his alley. Finally, to round out the starting five, you've got Nick Pringle from last season and Cliff Omeroy from this season. I think I'll even go first with this one before you kind of. This is a slam dunk, literally a slam dunk because both people can really bring it down. But you've got one of the best rim defenders in Cliff. To Pringle's credit, he really stepped up at the end of the season and really kind of avoided the foul trouble that he had run into. He was a big point in Alabama's turnaround late in the tournament. But with Omeroy, you've got a consistent elite big, that the kind of elite big that I think you need to win a title. And so that was the biggest offseason move, maybe other than retaining Mark Sears. But I think you could even argue that it's even bigger than retaining Mark Sears just because bigs are so rare in basketball, and there's not a lot of them to go around. I think Alabama's got one of the best ones. His numbers might not be, crazy in terms of points, but he's going to get rebounds, he's going to get blocks, and he's going to be, he's going to open up things too for Grant Nelson. I just think he's going to be so vital to this Alabama offense and defense. And I just think that this is probably the clearest of all the picks we've made.
Yeah, Mark Sears said it best. To have an anchor like that makes everyone else on the defensive end more comfortable. I think it's going to allow Alabama's guards to be more aggressive on the perimeter, knowing, if they get blown by, you've got this monster in the paint to deal with. I mean, you saw what Alabama's defensive numbers were in 2023 when they had Charles Bediako. To me, it's going to be very similar to that. And frankly, Clifford Omeroy gives you a lot more offensive upside than I think Bediako even could. I think you're right. His scoring numbers won't be as high as they were at Rutgers just because he won't be the number one guy down there. But yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. He led the Big Ten in blocks. He was first team all defense. You can look up all the numbers, watch the tape. He is going to be ridiculous. Nate Oates has already said it as much. They needed this big time last year. And Nick Pringle was maybe my favorite guy to cover on the team last year. He is going to take that South Carolina-Alabama game personally and want to get the better of Cliff when he is in the paint. And I think South Carolina is going to love him because he does play with a lot of tenacity. But yeah, it's just what this opens up on the defensive end. And I think what it's going to allow Alabama to do and just how much better they're going to be on that end of the floor. They were, I think, 111th in defensive efficiency by the end of the season. I expect that number to be a lot closer to what it was in 2023, given the way Oates emphasizes defense and the way Cliff has already seemed to fit in. He likes the blue collar stuff as well. He was having a lot of fun. I know
in that regard.
He was having a lot of fun. I know on their retreat and just being that guy. And Big Cliff will be big fun, I think, for Alabama this year.
So I mean, overall, what do we got? We've got I think I went 4 out of 5.
I technically had 3 out of 5 just because I went, with
4 out of 5 for this year, and I think you had 3 out of 5 for this year. So, I think you could overall say it's going to be an improved starting 5. You start looking at the bench too. I think that the bench is going to be significantly better this year than it was last year. Just look at some of these options. I mean, I think, right down the line, I think you almost have somebody that could probably start on at least one SEC team. Everybody on this roster could at least probably find an SEC team to start on. So it's going to be an exciting team to watch, and it's definitely going to be something exciting to kind of get our first look Friday night. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it for sure. I mean, and I think Alabama fans, if you're reading my article or going through, don't let that lineup be set in stone for you. This team could
Sure,
go with
yeah.
so many starting lineups. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like Tony said, there is an abundance of wealth on this team, and now it'll be about how they kind of bring it together. I'm excited to see what Chris Youngblood gives when he finally comes back in December. And
Darren
yeah, I think
Reed,
yeah,
uh,
De'Aaron Reed is going to be scary. He was my first when I was writing the guy I would have swapped in for one of these starters for sure. He is really talented, probably an NBA guy if everything goes right. So enjoy him for while you got him, Alabama fans. Yeah, I'm excited for the event. Excited to see the banner go up. Excited for the dunk contest. We'll see. Those always like would scare me. I know, even as like a fan, you don't want anyone to get hurt in those. That's just what I'm always
I just
scared of.
as fun as like that sounds, I don't know if Alabama has like the players to translate to a great dunk competition. I don't want to like pour a damper on it, but maybe we'll see. Grant Nelson throw down I just don't know. Does he have the dunks that like? I think Grant Nelson's a good like in-game dunker. Is he gonna bring the flair
Yeah,
to it,
you might just need to roll Donovan Clingan out there and just
or
say
just
go.
put like Cliff out there and maybe? But
Have him
I don't know.
have him jump over a car like Blake Griffin. I
Yeah.
think you frankly in a Nate Oates team, the thing you should really be excited for is the 3-point contest. I mean,
Yeah,
what
that would
kind of
be
players
so
that can win
shoot
that?
between, I think of Mark Sears, Latrell Wrightsell, and then Aiden Holloway is another guy we hadn't talked about, but a 5-star guy coming in from Auburn. He's been lighting it up this preseason too. So yeah, that 3-point competition will be steep.
Without a doubt, it'll be fun. So enjoy that event if you're going to it, and enjoy the South Carolina game the day after. Be a quick turnaround. We know that for sure as reporters. So we're not looking forward to that, but looking forward to covering both things without a doubt. We'll obviously be back on Monday with a recap of South Carolina, and yeah, we'll start introing hoops as this month closes into November, and we get ready for what's going to be an exciting season for Alabama. So hope you enjoyed the show this week. Enjoy the South Carolina game if you're going. A lot less traffic, no political figures in town this time. So I think you have a more easy ride into Bryant-Denny. So enjoy that. Enjoy the 11 a.m. kick. We'll see you guys next time.